Reuben Cole found the blood before he found the woman. A dark red trail through fresh snow, dragged, not dripped, which meant she had been conscious long enough to move and then stopped. August was already ahead of him, down the slope, pushing through the frost-stiff brush toward the sound Reuben had almost missed. Not a scream, not a cry for help. The sound a person makes when they have stopped believing anyone is coming. He went over the edge of that ridge without thinking about it. What he found at the bottom made his chest lock up in a way it had not done since the winter of '79. A woman, young, maybe 24, maybe less, lying against a granite shelf with one leg bent completely wrong and both hands pressed flat against her stomach. 8 months pregnant, maybe more. Her lips were moving without sound, and her skin had the blue-white color of someone who had been in the cold too long. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat. The pulse was there, thin as wire. Barely. August lay down beside her without being told. Reuben had spent 4 years in these mountains becoming a man who did not get involved. He had chosen this life deliberately, built it carefully, maintained it at great personal cost. He looked at this woman in the snow, at her hands over her unborn child, at the specific way she had positioned herself even unconscious, protecting the baby even as her own body failed, and every wall he had spent 4 years building came down in about 4 seconds. He built the travois in 18 minutes. Pine poles, belt leather, the oilcloth tarp from his pack. He moved fast because fast was the only option, and also because moving fast meant he did not have to think about whose hands this reminded him of, lying still, not moving, while snow settled on her lashes. 3 miles back to the cabin. Uphill for the last one. The storm came in sideways before they reached the timber. He did not think about what would happen if she died before they got inside. He just walked. 1 foot, then the next. Inside he built the fire, boiled the water, and examined her properly in real light for the first time. The head wound was serious. The leg was a compound situation that would need resetting before the morning was out. And the bruising on her jaw was old. 5 days old, yellowing at the edges. The ring of bruising on her wrist was something else entirely. That was a grip. A specific, deliberate grip. The kind that came from someone holding a person in place who did not want to be held. Reuben sat back on his heels and looked at this stranger in his bed and understood that whatever had put her at the bottom of that ravine was not an accident. August lay down at her feet and sighed. She woke up swinging. Her fist caught empty air 6 inches from Reuben's ear, and he pulled back fast enough. She pressed herself against the wall, broken leg and all, scanning the room the way an animal scans for exits. Door. Window. Dog. Man. She stayed on the man. Reuben put both hands flat on his knees where she could see them. Did not move toward her. Did not speak. She looked at the bandage on her head. The splinted leg. The blanket tucked around her shoulders. Something moved through her eyes that was not quite trust, but was the thing you reach for when trust is not available. "Where am I?" she said. Her voice was gravel. He told her. "North of the Gros Ventre. 2 days from anywhere." She asked about the baby second. Not first. Second. The first thing she asked was how long she had been out. 3 days, he told her. Her face did something complicated at that. Not relief. The calculation of a person who needed 3 days to not exist, and was now doing math about what that meant. "The baby is fine," he said. "Strong. I checked every few hours." He did not tell her that on the second night he had pressed his ear to her stomach because the silence had scared him. He did not tell her that feeling the baby kick had required him to stand at the window for 10 minutes breathing through his nose before he could go back to work. She did not say thank you. She looked at the door. He got up, poured broth into a tin cup, set it beside her without a word, and went back to his chair and picked up the tack leather he had been mending. She watched him for a long time before she reached for the cup. He understood, in that moment, that she was not deciding whether to trust him. She was deciding whether she could run. Even now, even broken, the fact that she was still running the calculation told him everything about what she had been running from. Over the days that followed, he learned her in pieces the way you learn a trail. Not from what she said, from what she did not say. She flinched at boot heels on the porch. She ate quickly, like a person who had learned that food could disappear. She never sat with her back to the door. Her name was Nora. Nora Voss, she said, which he would later learn was her mother's name, not the one she had been living under. On the 4th day, he gave her a pile of leather strapping that needed oiling. She did not just oil it. She restitched 3 cracking seams using a cross-brace pattern he had never seen, one that doubled the strength exactly where the stress would hit. On the 6th day, he came home to find his entire medicine shelf reorganized, every herb and root labeled in small, careful handwriting on paper torn from a book margin. She looked at him when he walked in, waiting for anger. He looked at the shelf, looked at her, nodded once. Something in her shoulders came down about a 1/4 inch. She had been a healer, not a doctor's wife. Something older than that. Self-taught, practiced, deeply competent in a way that came from years of work rather than instruction. On the 8th night, he was cleaning his rifle by lamplight when she said, without turning her head, "You are not going to ask me what happened?" "No," he said. "Why not?" "Because you will tell me when you are ready, or you will not. Either way, I need to know how to care for that leg, not how you broke it." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What if I told you I might not be who you think I am?" He ran the cleaning rod through the barrel. "I never thought you were anyone in particular," he said. "I just thought you were someone who needed help." She turned and looked at him then, like she was searching for the catch. There was no catch. Here is what he had not told her yet. The man who put those bruises on her wrist had come through the lower valley 5 days before Reuben found her. He had stopped at the trading post in Minden. He had described his pregnant wife as mentally unstable, wandered off, possibly dangerous to herself. He had used a warm voice and a concerned expression and had left a name, Dylan Garth, as in the largest private cattle operation in Fremont County, as in a man whose name appeared on half the land deeds between here and the Wyoming line. When Reuben said the name out loud, the tin cup in Nora's hand began to shake. She set it down carefully before it could spill. She looked at him with an expression that was not fear exactly. It was the expression of someone who had been right about a terrible thing and taken no satisfaction from it. "He is still out there," she said. "Yes," Reuben said. Something settled in her eyes then. Not peace. Decision. The specific look of a person who has stopped calculating escape routes and started calculating something else entirely. She told him the rest over the next hour. 3 years managing Dylan's operation quietly while he took the credit publicly. 3 years watching him displace homesteading families through forged deeds and falsified land claims. 3 years copying documents by candlelight while he slept, building a case so thorough it could not be argued away. For families. 40 pages. Dates, amounts, real signatures next to forged ones, side by side. She had been on her way to a federal investigator in Cheyenne named Arthur Briggs when the wagon she had paid for passage turned out to be driven by one of Dylan's men. She had jumped before he could deliver her somewhere with a locked door. The ravine had been the accident. Everything before it had not. "Where are the documents now?" Reuben said. She reached into the lining of her coat hanging by the door and produced an oilskin packet, flat and dense. She had sewn it into the seam herself. He took it and turned it over in his hands. "This is enough to bury him," he said. "Yes," she said. "If I can get it to Briggs before Dylan gets to me first." Reuben looked at her for a long moment. He was about to speak when August stood up from his spot by the stove and walked to the door and stood with his ears straight and his tail completely still. That specific posture meant one thing. He was at the window in 4 steps. 2 riders at the tree line, sitting still, watching the cabin with the patience of men who were being paid to be patient. He turned. Nora was already off the bed, scanning the room. Her eyes found the root cellar hatch near the stove. He gave her one nod, and she moved without hesitation, down through the hatch with the documents pressed against the baby and the baby pressed against her chest. He lowered the hatch and moved the braided rug over it with his boot. Then he picked up his rifle and opened the front door. The deputy out of Landers said he was looking for a woman named Nora Garth. Reuben said he had not seen a soul in 3 weeks. The deputy looked at the cabin, at the dog, at Reuben, and said he would be back. Reuben said that was his right and watched them ride away without blinking. He opened the hatch. Nora looked up from the dark below with Wren against her chest and the documents in her other hand, like she was the last wall between them and everything that wanted them gone. "They are gone," he said. "For now," she said. He reached down and helped her up. His hand stayed around hers a beat longer than necessary. Neither of them said anything about it. That night, he told her something he had not told anyone. His wife, Clara, had died in the winter of '79. "Fever," he said. He left it there, the way a man leaves a stone on a grave. But what he did not say, what he had never said out loud to a living person, was that the fever had come after. That what had actually killed Clara was a land dispute that turned violent while he was 3 days out on the trap line. That the men who burned their cabin to send a message had done so on behalf of a cattle operation that wanted their water rights. An operation that, as of 6 months ago when he had last traded furs in Minden, was being run by a man named Dylan Garth. He did not say that part. Not yet. He sat with it in the dark and looked at the fire and listened to the wind press against the logs and understood that the woman asleep in his bed with documents sewn into her coat was not just a stranger he had rescued. She was the loose thread of the thing that had unraveled his entire life. And she had been pulling on it for 3 years from the inside. He did not sleep that night. The baby came 4 days later on a Tuesday morning when the sky was white and the temperature had dropped another 10 degrees overnight. Nora had been timing contractions since midnight, alone in the dark, counting her own heartbeats, which told Reuben everything he needed to know about how long she had been carrying things by herself. He put 2 pots of water on the stove before she admitted it was time. She directed him through every step in a flat, practical voice that never rose even when the pain was clearly enormous, which he could tell by the depth of the handprints she left in the mattress ticking. The baby arrived at 4:30. A girl. Small, furious, absolutely certain she had opinions about this situation. August spun in a confused circle when she cried and then lay back down with great dignity. Reuben wrapped her in the cleanest flannel he owned, a piece he had been keeping for no reason he could have named until this moment, and placed her in Nora's arms. He went outside and stood in the cold for 10 minutes and looked at the mountains until he was sure his face was not saying anything it should not. Nora named her Wren. Because wrens are small, she said, and nothing can shut them up. Dylan Garth came himself on the 14th day, for riders out of the east, moving with the confidence of men who knew exactly where they were going. He was handsome the way men who have never been told no tend to be. Polished. Certain. He looked at Nora on the porch and performed relief so convincingly that someone who had not lived with her for 2 weeks might have believed it. Nora stepped down 1 step and held up the oilskin packet where he could see it. His performed warmth did not disappear. It shifted, became something colder wearing the same face. She named the documents one by one. The Kendrick deed, the Morrison claim, the Abbotts, the Pierce family, 40 pages, and a federal investigator in Cheyenne who had been waiting on exactly this evidence for 2 years. Dylan's jaw moved. Fine, he said. Keep the papers. He reached into his coat and produced a folded document of his own, holding it up. But there is a warrant here for Reuben Cole. Triple murder out of Teton County. $500. I wonder what a federal judge thinks about a wanted killer hiding a woman and coaching her testimony. Reuben went very still. Nora did not flinch. She looked at Dylan and said, and I wonder what a federal judge thinks about a man who ordered the burning of a homestead cabin in the winter of '79, with a woman inside. The color left Dylan's face so fast it was almost impressive. Because that was the document she had not shown him. The one at the bottom of the oilskin packet. The one she had found 3 months before she ran, tucked inside a ledger she was not supposed to open. A payment record. $200, cash, to a man named Cord, for services rendered, Teton County, December '79. She had not known whose wife was in that cabin. She had not known the man on her porch was the reason she had found Reuben Cole living like a ghost in the high country. She had figured it out the night he said Clara's name. She had been waiting for the right moment to say it out loud. Reuben looked at Dylan Garth and felt something move through him that was not rage exactly. It was older than rage. It was the specific weight of 4 years of grief finding its source. Dylan's hand moved toward his rifle. One of his men raised his weapon. August came off the porch before the motion was finished and hit the man's horse so fast and low that the animal shied hard left and the rider went sideways into the snow. The remaining men pulled weapons, but Reuben already had the rifle up and the angle was extremely unfavorable for everyone who was not Reuben. Dylan raised one hand. His men held. You have nothing, Dylan said. His voice was steady, but his horse was not. I have 40 pages and a living witness and a federal investigator who has been building your file for 2 years, Nora said. And now I have a payment record with your name on it and a dead woman's name attached to it. She looked at him evenly. Right away, Dylan. While that is still a choice you can make. He looked at her for a long time. Then at Reuben. Then at the rifle. Then at the ground. He rode away. His men followed. Reuben stood at the porch rail until the sound of hooves was gone from the valley entirely. Then he stood there another 5 minutes because his hands needed a moment. Nora sat down on the top step. Just sat down, right there, like her legs had voted without consulting her. She held Ren against her chest and pressed her face into that small dark head and breathed. After a while she said, "I did not know it was your wife. Not when I found the record." "I know," he said. "When did you figure out it was connected?" He sat down beside her. "When you told me his name the first night," he said. "I had been looking for the man who gave the order for 4 years. I never found a name. I just found silence." She was quiet. The valley was very still around them. She said, "Is that why you saved me?" "Because of him." He thought about it honestly. "No," he said. "I saved you because you were bleeding in the snow and you were 8 months pregnant, and I am not built for walking away from that. The rest I figured out after." She looked at him sideways. "And now?" He looked north, at the mountain line going blue and cold against the early dark. "Now we go to Cheyenne," he said. "You give Briggs everything. I testify to the payment record and what it connects to. We finish it. And after," she said. He looked at her, at Ren asleep against her chest, at August sitting between them with his chin lifted into the wind like a small, dignified senator. "There is a valley north of here," he said. "Better timber than where I was. South-facing slope. Good water. Room enough to build something that does not need to hide." She looked at him for a long time. Her breath made small clouds in the air between them. "I want a window facing east," she said. "So the morning comes in first." He said, "I can do that." She said, "And bookshelves. Real ones." He said, "I can do that too." They left at dawn. No ceremony. No forwarding address. The mountain received them the way it received everything, without judgment, without memory, without any interest in what they were leaving behind. The hearing in Cheyenne took 2 days. Nora testified for 4 hours. Precise. Unflinching. When Dylan's lawyers raised the question of her mental stability, Briggs produced 7 written statements from Fremont County residents. One of them was from the deputy who had come to the cabin. Reuben had visited him quietly during the 5 weeks they waited for the hearing date, and the deputy, it turned out, had his own reasons to want Dylan Garth in a courtroom. The payment record for the Teton County fire was entered into evidence on the afternoon of the second day. Dylan Garth did not look at Reuben when it was read aloud. He looked at the floor, which told Reuben everything. Remanded into federal custody before sundown. Outside on the courthouse steps, the February air was clean and brutal. Nora stood beside Reuben, and neither of them spoke for a while. Ren was awake, looking at the street traffic with the intense concentration of a person who had recently discovered that the world was enormous and apparently full of opinions. Nora said, "I do not want to go back." "I know," he said. She looked at him. "So we go north." "We go north," he agreed. They built the cabin that spring on the south-facing slope he had described. Reuben raised the walls and Nora chinked them. She planted the garden while he laid the fireplace stone. The east window went in last, salvaged from a trading post 2 days south, strapped to the pack mule who communicated his feelings about this the entire journey. The first morning the light came through it. Nora stood in the middle of the room they had built and watched the sun move across the floor and said nothing at all. Ren sat up in the cradle Reuben had made and grabbed at the light with both hands. August lay in the warm patch of it and closed his eyes. Reuben stood in the doorway with coffee and looked at all 3 of them and understood something that had taken him 4 years of silence to get close enough to hear. Grief was not a room you escaped. It was a room you eventually filled back up with something worth keeping. They did not go back to the world that had taken so much from both of them. They did not wait for that world to recognize what it had done or make it right. They drew a new map, one with their names on it, one where the old rules had no jurisdiction and no reach and no memory long enough to find them. Nora carved the name of the valley into a pine board and nailed it to the post at the head of the trail herself. Wren Valley. Simple, accurate, non-negotiable. And on the mornings when Reuben came in from the line to find her at the east window with tea and a book and the light doing something particular to the room, he would stand in the doorway long enough to make sure the image settled somewhere permanent in him. He had spent 4 years trying to want nothing. It turned out that was just a longer way of being lost. This was found. Both of them. Finally, stubbornly, completely, on no one's terms but their own.